can see not only the old, does this also appear to be what you talked about, the tubes that are still there?
Yes, and you can see the actual crime log number, the CL-23-001060. You can see that on the labels within that bag, within the hold bin.
Anything about the handling of evidence involving this case out of the ordinary as far as using FedEx, NMS lab, retaining the evidence? Was it handled according to your protocol?
Yes, this was handled according to our protocol. I've thoroughly reviewed our chain of custody and have seen no issues or discrepancies with our ship date, when NMS received the samples, when they shipped them, when they returned back to us. And we routinely use NMS laboratories, so we will make shipments to them almost every month, routinely. So this is a very common process for us.
And would that be true for any other items that may have come into the crime lab regarding this case and then gone out for further testing?
Yes, we also outsource cases for DNA to another laboratory, and they follow the same standard protocols.
And larger items or items, containers, do they eventually go back to the property room?
So it depends on the type of analysis requested in the unit. Toxicology cases do not go back to the property room. They stay in-house for 1 year, and if we have no hold requests, then the evidence will be destroyed after 1 year.
Those are my questions, Rob.
My question.
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Sweet.
Good afternoon.
Saw a whole bunch of pictures that just came up, and I'm not going to ask you about individual pictures, but one thing I was kind of noticing as they were coming across is we're talking a lot about labels and how things were labeled, and that seems to be a very important part of what you do and what the crime lab does. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you take a lot of care to make sure things are labeled accurately.
Yes, we do.
And there's a lot of different kinds of labels, too. Is that right?
We have, in our laboratory, our labels are pretty uniform on what we put on the case as far as a crime lab number and specific item number.
Well, let me clarify that, because that was kind of a bad question. I noticed different types of labels, like you have a label for your crime lab, right?
Yes.
And NMS Labs has their own label.
Yes.
There's sometimes tape across the top that says evidence on it. That's a kind of label, right?
That would be, I would consider that a kind of seal.
Okay,
Yes.
seal. And that's important too, right?
It is.
There was even on one of those outside bags that someone wrote in marker hold on it, right?
Yes, that was somebody in our toxicology unit.
That's a direction, but that's kind of a label too, right?
Yes.
So there's all, and I'm being a little big picture here, but there's all kinds of labels that help people know what to do with certain kinds of specimens, right?
Yes.
And it's important that those labels are accurate, right?
It is.
And part of your job, you're maybe not doing all the labeling, but you're kind of overseeing, making sure that everything is done in the right way, or that your lab is operating in the right way, right?
Yes.
And that's part of because you're a manager, right?
Yes.
And then, am I right, and did I understand it that in your managerial role, you're kind of like a in-between person for communications between these different entities?
I am. I'm an in-between person communicating with our police department, with other laboratories and agencies, yes.
Sure, so you work for the police department,
Yes.
in the lab, but still for the police department.
Yes.
Sometimes you communicate with the actual detectives or whoever's investigating the case.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes you communicate with NMS Labs.
Yes.
Sometimes you communicate directly with the district attorney's office.
Yes.
And as part of that, you're one of the people that helps make sure everybody knows what needs to be done at various parts of the investigation.
Yes.
So if NMS Labs needs some information on what kind of test needs to be done for what specimen, are you the person that helps kind of connect that information between agencies?
Myself or the toxicology unit supervisor specifically would probably be more involved in that in most scenarios with our DUI cases. But they are the ones responsible for what testing panel is being ordered.
So, for example, and let me know if you remember this, I think we even maybe had a call about this several months ago. There was a situation in this case where there was some testing requested and some testing not requested. Do you remember that vaguely? And I'll ask more specifically if that helps.
Yes, if you could, that would be helpful.
So do you remember there was a comforter in this case that there was some testing done?
Yes.
And some initial, and we don't have to talk about the reasons for it or the specific results necessarily, but like initial panels suggested that there was cocaine, fentanyl, marijuana, and amphetamines at a very kind of low level screening. Remember that?
I do remember that.
And that there was some subsequent communications about what do we want further testing on. And you were involved in those communications, right?
I was with some of the specimens. I don't know, I'm not aware of all the specimens, only what came through our laboratory and was sent. But I was involved in some of what was being tested as far as ordering the panels.
Sure. And ultimately the decisions were made, we're just going to test for cocaine and fentanyl, right?
Yes.
And there were probably reasons for that. There was a lot of communication surrounding that. You know, you may or may not have been the person making that decision, but you're involved in the communications, right?
I was.
And those communications are really between kind of the toxicologists and maybe the DA's office and law enforcement who are investigating the case, right?
Yes.
And you are kind of involved in coordinating that.
I was.
And ultimately, you did end up being kind of present at like this final team meeting before a charging decision was made in this case, weren't you?
I was involved in a meeting to discuss some of the samples and what was ordered and things like that, yes.
And that was sort of with the detective and the district attorney's office, and you were kind of there to help explain what was done in the toxicology in this case, right?
Yes, what samples we had received, what samples had been sent out in regards to what we had in our laboratory.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Any redirect?